A year passed. The silence that had descended upon human space was no longer just the absence of news from the Ninth Fleet. It was a policy. It was a state of being. On Earth, the grand monuments to expansion stood quiet. The shipyards around Luna now produced no new Pulse-class battleships. Instead, they built listening posts and long-range, passive sensor arrays. The Unified Defense Command was not disbanded, but its purpose was fundamentally, irrevocably altered. The new commander of deep space operations, a somber woman named Park, had overseen the rewriting of the military's core doctrine herself. The first line now read, "Our primary strategic objective is to avoid transgression." The public story had been carefully managed. The official line stated the Ninth Fleet had been lost to an unprecedented spatial catastrophe, a natural disaster of cosmic scale. Memorials were held. The names of Admiral Jin, Chief Engineer Su, Pilot Min, and all the others were etched into walls of black marble. The truth was known only to a select council and to the individuals who had touched the raw data. For the wider population, a vague but potent sense of cosmic dread took hold. A collective understanding that some doors, once opened, should have been left closed. The most significant change was the creation of the Galactic Compliance Division. It was housed in a secure, windowless complex buried deep under the Alps, far from the political noise of the capital. Its head was Analyst Hana. Her promotion was not a reward. It was a sentence. She was the one who had understood the warning first. Now she was tasked with ensuring humanity never forgot it. Her division's work was not about exploration. It was about avoidance. Teams of astronomers, xenolinguists, and physicists worked around the clock, not to decipher how to reach new stars, but to identify any signal, any anomaly. That might be another boundary marker. They mapped the silent, dark sectors of space with a new goal, to chart the places they must never go. The star charts in the GCC were not filled with promising resource worlds or colony sites. They were marked with great swaths of red, labeled with simple, chilling codes. Asterisk zone of silence. Grid X987 type, potential perimeter. Asterisk, it was tedious, terrifying work. Every unusual gamma ray burst, every repeating pulsar, was analyzed with a single question. Is this a warning? Ambassador Kim sat on the GCC's Oversight Committee. He and Hana spoke often, in quiet tones. They were the keepers of the secret, the wardens of humanity's new cage. "We have traded stars for survival," Kim said once, looking at a holographic map flickering with red zones. "It is a humble thing." Hana nodded. Humility was the lesson, the only one they offered. The other living repository of the lesson was Yuna. She was released from the medical facility on Dymas, but she was not healed. She lived in a quiet, isolated residence on the coast, where the sound of the ocean was a gentle constant, unlike the perfect silence of the void. Dr. Lee visited her weekly. The violent tremors had subsided, replaced by a deep, watchful stillness. She spoke little, but when she did, her words were clear. She had no memory of her life before the fleet. Her past began with the opening of the escape pod hatch on Dymas. Everything before was darkness. Hana visited her too, not as a doctor, but as the only other person who had truly listened to the void. They would sit on the porch, watching the waves. "Do you think they're still out there? The ones who made the boundary?" Yuna asked one afternoon, her voice distant. "I don't think they are a who in a way we can understand," Hana said carefully. "It's more like a law, a self-enforcing law. We broke it, and it corrected us." Yuna was silent for a long time. "It let me go to deliver the message. I am the message. Every time someone looks at me and knows what happened, a message is repeated." Hana could not deny it. Yuna's existence was the most powerful compliance tool they had. Commander Park had quietly suggested bringing her to the GCC to speak to new personnel. Hannah had refused. Yuna had given enough. Back in the Alps, the work continued. A young technician, eager and still brimming with pre-Ninth Fleet curiosity, brought Hannah a new signal. It was from the Sagittarius arm, a pattern that was almost, but not quite, random. Could be a natural quantum echo, he said, hope in his voice. Or it could be something else. Should we send a focused ping? Try to say hello? Hannah looked at the data, then at the young man's face. She saw Min the pilot's confidence, Admiral Jin's certainty. She pointed to a screen on the wall, which showed a simple text-based log. It was the last entry from the Ninth Fleet, followed by the final message from the crystal. We do not say hello, Hannah said, her voice firm but not unkind. We listen. We evop. We avoid. That is our only task now. We are not explorers here. We are guests who have been told to stay in our room. The technician's face fell, but he understood. He went back to his station and marked the sector for passive observation only. The curiosity was beaten out of them, replaced by a vigilant, fearful respect. The story of the Ninth Fleet faded from public news cycles, but its shadow stretched across generations. Scholarships for bold galactic exploration were quietly renamed to fellowships in passive xenological study. Children's stories no longer featured brave captains conquering alien worlds, but careful listeners decoding messages from the dark. One evening, Hannah left the complex and took a shuttle to the coast. She found Yuna on the porch, wrapped in a blanket. The sky was clear, and the first stars were emerging. They sat together without speaking for a while, looking up. The stars no longer twinkled with promise. They glimmered like the cold, watchful eyes of a vast and incomprehensible being. Each pinprick of light was now a potential boundary, a line that must not be crossed. Yuna finally spoke, her eyes fixed on the constellation of Orion, where somewhere in its depths Sector X987 lay. Do you think they think we're being quiet enough? Hannah followed her gaze. She thought of the red zones on her maps, of the silenced engines, of the fear that now guided their every move. I think we have no choice but to be, she said. The price of noise is not something we can pay again. The Ninth Fleet was gone. It had never reported back, but in its utter, silent annihilation, it had delivered humanity's most important report. It had taught them the scale of their own smallness. It had taught them to fear the quiet. And so, under the indifferent stars, humanity learned its final lesson: to be silent, to be still, and to be very, very careful where it looked. The silence that followed the Ninth Fleet's disappearance was heavier than any news of a battle could have been. On Earth and her colonies, a state of confused mourning settled in. There were no heroic last stands to celebrate, no enemy to condemn. There was only a void where 12 ships and 20,000 souls had been. Official statements spoke of a tragic and unexplained anomaly. The truth, the warning, was buried deeper in classified files. A month passed. The investigation, led by a stunned and demoralized Unified Defense Command, went in circles. Every probe sent toward Sector X987 either lost contact or returned with blank sensors. It was as if a wall had been drawn across that part of space, a wall that swallowed data and light. Analyst Hannah, now assigned permanently to the grim boundary analysis team, felt the truth like a physical weight. They had poked something vast and sleeping, and it had not even blinked as it removed the irritation. And a miracle, or a carefully delivered message. A deep space tracking station near Mars detected a small object on a slow, deliberate approach vector. It was not stealthed. It broadcast a simple, repeating signal on an old emergency band, a human band. It was an escape pod, model HS-12, Standard issue for the Pulse-class battleships. A wave of frantic, desperate hope swept through command. A survivor? There could be answers. Fighter squadrons were scrambled to intercept and escort the pod. Medical teams stood by in a high-security dock on Dymas. Ambassador Kim, his face gaunt from a month of little sleep, observed from a secure viewing gallery alongside a silent General Pack. The pod entered the dock under sterile, robotic guidance. Its hull was scarred, not by weapons fire, but by strange, crystalline patterns that seemed etched into the metal. It was cold, terribly cold, as if it had drifted through the void between galaxies. The hatch hissed open. Medical drones moved in. Inside, strapped into the single acceleration couch, was Communications Officer Yuna. She was alive, but the sight stole the breath from the watching medics. She was emaciated, her skin pale and waxy. Her eyes were open, but they stared at nothing, seeing something far away. Her hands trembled violently in her lap. A thin medical cuff on her wrist showed life signs that were weak and erratic, as if her body was forgetting how to function. They moved her with extreme care to a waiting mobile hospital unit. As they lifted her, a small, pristine object slid from a storage clamp beside the couch and clattered to the deck. It was a data crystal of a make common to Earth, but it glowed with a soft, internal blue light that was not standard. A technician, wearing thick gloves, retrieved it with tongs and placed it in a containment case. For 3 days, Yuna floated in a state of catatonic shock. She was fed intravenously. She did not speak. Her vital signs stabilized, but her mind seemed absent. Hannah was granted permission to sit with her, alongside a gentle-voiced trauma specialist named Dr. Lee. On the 4th day, Yuna's eyes flickered. They focused, slowly, on the ceiling and on Hannah's face. A choked sound escaped her lips. Hannah leaned forward, not touching her. "Yuna, you're safe. You're on Dymas. Can you hear me?" Yuna's gaze was one of profound, universe-shattering terror. Her voice was a dry rasp, barely audible. It wasn't. An attack. What wasn't? Dr. Lee asked softly. The fleet. A tear traced a path through the grime still on her temple. It was a correction. We were a mistake. A noise. She began to speak in fragments, between bouts of trembling and staring into the middle distance. She described the silence first. The perfect, absolute silencing of all ship sounds. She described the unyielding resolve flowing like water. She described the dauntless spirit turning to dust. She spoke of gravity bending into knots, of space showing its skeleton in fractal patterns. There was no hate in it, she insisted, her voice breaking. No anger. It was a process. A cold, clean, logical process of removing something that did not belong. Admiral Jin. He understood at the end, she whispered. He just said, "Oh," before the light came. Hannah took notes, her own hand shaking. This was confirmation of every terrible hypothesis. The pod, Hannah asked gently. How did you escape? Yuna's face contorted. I didn't. It wasn't an escape. It was a return. The pod was sealed. I was inside. Then I was outside the fleet, outside the sector. I was placed here like a piece of mail. It let me go so I could tell you. A deep chill settled over the room. The pod was not a lucky break. It was a deliberate act. Meanwhile, in a high-security lab, the data crystal was analyzed. It was not encrypted. It contained 2 files. The first was a sensor log playback from the Morning Star's final moments. Scientists and commanders watched in stupefied horror as the visual feed showed the laws of reality breaking down in beautiful, impossible ways, culminating in the translation of the flagship into light. The second file was new. It was not a recording from the ship Dot. It was a message. When played, it showed only the starfield of Sector X987, now peaceful and empty. A voice spoke. It was not a biological voice. It was synthesized from a chorus of sounds. The ping of a sonar, the crackle of static, the ring of struck crystal. It was utterly devoid of emotion. Dot. It said, "Warning was final. Next transgression ends your species. You are loud, and we hear you. Be silent." A message ended. The file looped once, then the crystal itself dissolved into a harmless inert powder inside its containment case. The delivery was complete. Dot in the viewing gallery. General Pack watched the playback. A color drained from his face. The arrogance, the bluster, the certainty of human power, it all crumbled. The message was not a negotiation. It was a verdict. The Ninth Fleet had been a test. Humanity had failed. The next failure would be their last. Dot. Ambassador Kim turned to him. There were no words of rebuke. The horror was too complete for "I told you so." They brought the message to Una. They played the audio. At the sound of the chorus voice, she curled into a fetal position, a low whine escaping her. But she nodded. "That's it. That's the voice of the place. That's what's there." Hannah, looking from Una's broken form to the now empty containment case, understood the new reality. This was not first contact. This was a final notice from a landlord to a noisy, destructive tenant. The galaxy was not a frontier. It was a library, a museum, a garden, and humanity had just stumbled into a section marked "Do Not Touch," with consequences beyond their comprehension. The survival of Una was not a kindness. It was the coldest, most efficient form of communication possible. She was the proof, the messenger, and the living warning all in one. Her every tremble, her shattered psyche, was part of the message. This is what happens to noise. Be silent. The Ninth Fleet was gone. But it had, finally, delivered a report. It was a report written in the dissolution of its ships, carried home in the mind of a broken woman, and on a self-destructing crystal. The report was clear. Humanity's period of reckless expansion was over. The only choice left was to listen, or to be erased. On Earth, in the Unified Defense Command's main situation room, the mood was one of bored patience. A large holoscreen showed the last known position of the Ninth Fleet. A tiny cluster of icons in a vast, empty sector labeled X987. Beneath it, the log entry of Admiral Jin's first and only report glowed softly. No contacts. No immediate threats detected. Ambassador Kim sat in a corner chair, his eyes fixed on the screen. The initial tension following the fleet's departure had faded for everyone else, replaced by the mundane routine of waiting. Junior officers drank coffee and talked softly about other matters. The senior officer who had championed the mission, General Pack, was already drafting a statement about the successful navigation of a non-threat, framing it as a victory for human vigilance. 2 hours until the next scheduled check-in, a comms technician announced. Not looking up from his console, Kim said nothing. He remembered the cold, final syntax of the warning. Turn back. You did not post such a sign without having a door to protect. An empty room needed no lock. Out on the chrysalis station. Analyst Hannah had not slept. Her station was now directly patched into Command's network by their order. They wanted her to monitor for any signal anomalies. She knew it was a formality. They expected to hear from Jin, not from the void. The clock ticked over the time for the fleet's second report. The comms technician straightened up. "Sir, checking for incoming tight beam from the Ninth Fleet." He ran the sequence, opening the dedicated channel. He listened. His fingers danced over the controls, filtering frequencies. "Nothing on the primary, sir." Trying secondary. Silence filled the room, but it was a technical silence, Not yet an alarming one. Probably a comms lag, General Pack said, not looking away from his own data slate. A glitch in the relay synchronization. Give it time. They gave it an hour. Then 2. The technician's attempts became more frequent, his voice losing its casual tone. This is Earth Command to Ninth Fleet. Come in. Please acknowledge. Static was the only reply dot by the 6th hour of silence. The boredom in the situation room had evaporated, replaced by a low-grade, metallic worry. Kim watched as General Pack's confidence began to crack around the edges. Get me deep space telemetry, Pack ordered. Are we seeing their engine signatures? Any energy spikes? The answers came back negative. The sector was dark. As far as Earth's most powerful telescopes could see, there was nothing. The Ninth Fleet, 12 of humanity's largest warships, had simply vanished from observational reality. It's impossible, Pack muttered. A full fleet doesn't just lose communications. They have redundant systems emergency beacons. Hannah, listening from the chrysalis, knew the truth was settling in. She pulled up the real-time feed from the sector's general vicinity. No anomalous energy. No debris field. No warp trail leading away. It was as if the space they occupied had been reset. Her blood ran cold. The warning had not been a threat of attack. It was a description of a condition. Boundary is death. Being inside the boundary was the death. On Earth, theories erupted like panic. Mutiny? A coordinated fleet-wide rebellion was statistically insane. A secret weapon from a human rival? No faction had that power. A natural phenomenon? None known could swallow a fleet whole without a trace. Then, the first fragment of data arrived. Not from the fleet, but from a long-range astronomical survey satellite pointed in the general direction. It had recorded a transient event. For 1.3 seconds, the fabric of spacetime in Sector X987 had exhibited impossible readings. Gravitational waves not from a collision, but from a smoothing, as if a crumpled piece of paper had been made flat again. The data was bizarre, contradicting known physics. Kim stood up, his voice cutting through the technical babble. They are gone. The warning was real. Now we must understand what we have provoked. We must cease all transmissions to that sector. We must be silent. General Pack turned on him, his face flushed. We do not know they are gone. This is a setback, not a defeat. We will send a recon drone through the nearest warp gate. We need data. As the argument raged, Hannah, alone at her console, closed her eyes. She didn't need more data. In her mind, she could see it. She pieced together the silent, terrifying truth from the absence of information. The truth began the moment Admiral Jin closed his first report channel. On the bridge of the Morning Star, the first sign was not a blip on a screen, but a feeling. A sudden, profound stillness. The constant, subtle vibration of the ship's engines, a feeling so normal, no one noticed it until it was gone, simply ceased. The lights did not flicker. They just became somehow flat, like painted suns. Report, Jin said, his voice sharp. All systems? Normal, Admiral, the first officer replied, confusion in his tone. But the background M field just dropped to 0. It's like we're in a perfect vacuum. No cosmic radiation. Nothing. Then, the unyielding resolve, positioned at the fleet's starboard flank, shimmered. It was not an explosion. It was as if the ship was a reflection on a pond, and someone had dropped a stone. The mighty hull twisted, not breaking, but flowing like liquid metal. In absolute silence, it compressed into a perfect shimmering sphere the size of a shuttle. The sphere hung for a nanosecond, then vanished, leaving not even heat behind. No alarm sounded. The system that should have screamed warnings was just gone. What was that? Jin barked. Visual confirmation. Before anyone could answer, the dauntless spirit experienced a different fate. Its entire structure seemed to undergo a rapid, vicious corrosion. But it was not rust. It was a dissolution into gray dust, accelerating from the stern forward, as if it was being unmade from existence itself. Within 3 seconds, the ship was a cloud of fine particulate, which then dissipated into the void. Chaos, silent and horrifying, now gripped the fleet. Kun channels erupted with fragmented, terrified shouts that cut off mid-syllable. Pilot Min, scrambling to his interceptor in the Morning Star's bay, saw the roof of the hangar melt. It didn't drip. It streamed upward, defying gravity, sucked into a point in space. He was thrown against his fighter as the local gravity field inverted, then spun wildly. On the Steadfast, Chief Engineer Sue saw her warp core readings spike into the impossible, then flatline to 0. Her screens went black. The emergency lights did not come on. The only light was a cold blue radiance seeping in from the viewport. She looked out. Space outside was no longer black. It was a kaleidoscope of impossible geometries, folding in on itself. She saw the ship Steadfast beside them. The Vigilant passed through itself in a silent, ghostly interpenetration. Both vessels coming out the other side, not as wreckage, but as intricate. Frozen sculptures of crystal and smoke. It was not an attack. There was no enemy. It was the sector itself, the boundary, enforcing its rule. The laws of physics here were not laws. They were suggestions that could be revoked at will. Admiral Jin, clinging to his command chair as the Morning Star's deck plates began to vibrate at a frequency that made the air taste like metal, understood. The warning had not been a challenge. It had been a mercy. He had brought his fleet into a place they were never meant to be, and the place was simply deleting the error. Yuna, at her come station, was screaming, but she heard no sound. She saw the forward viewport show a starfield that was now a swirling, beautiful, and horrifying fractal pattern. She fumbled, not to send a distress call that was hopeless, but to activate the ship's black box recorder, to seal the final sensor data in a hardened pod. As she slammed her hand on the eject sequence, she saw the fractal pattern rush toward the ship. It did not impact. It enveloped. The Morning Star, Admiral Jin, Min in his bay, all of it was translated. Not into debris, but into light. A brief, beautiful flash of pure white energy that held the shape of the ship for a moment, then winked out. The pod shot away, the only solid object in a space that was now, once again, perfectly, peacefully empty. Back on Earth, the silence from the Ninth Fleet was now complete and absolute. The recon drone, sent hours later, would find nothing. No energy. No mass. No history. Ambassador Kim looked at the horrified faces in the Situation Room. The final sensor data from the astronomical satellite was up on the main screen, the smoothing of spacetime. They didn't fight anything, Kim said, his voice hollow in the quiet. They trespassed, and the universe erased them. The Ninth Fleet had not been destroyed. It had been unmade, and it had never reported back. The launch was a spectacle designed to banish doubt. From the observation decks of Lunar Dock Alpha, the gathered officials and press watched as one by one, the 12 battleships of the Ninth Fleet ignited their secondary thrusters. A silent, majestic ballet unfolded against the black velvet of space, pinpricked by immutable stars. Each ship was a mountain of polished alloy and weaponry, a Pulse-class behemoth bearing names like Unyielding Resolve and Dauntless Spirit. At their heart was the flagship, the Morning Star. Home to Admiral Jin. Inside the Morning Star, the mood was disciplined but bright. On the command bridge, Admiral Jin stood perfectly straight, his hands clasped behind his back. His face, illuminated by the soft glow of holographic displays, was calm. He had reviewed Analyst Hanna's report. He had heard the debates. A warning was a data point, not a directive. His duty was clear: proceed, assess, and secure. He believed in the strength of his fleet, in the training of his crews. He believed in showing no fear. All vessels report ready for warp sequence. Admiral, his first officer, said. Jin gave a single firm nod. Signal the dock. Ninth Fleet is departing. Set course for coordinates X987. Throughout the vast ship, crew members settled at their stations. In the fighter launch bay, Pilot Min ran a final diagnostic on his sleek interceptor. Call sign Raven. He patted the hull. Easy flight, they say. Just a show of the flag. His wingmate laughed. Maybe we'll get some unique vid captures. Something for the history files. Deep in the engineering labyrinth of the sister ship Steadfast, Chief Engineer Sue monitored the warp core's pre-ignition cycle. Her screens were a symphony of green readouts. All systems optimal, she muttered to herself, a small smile on her face. This was her masterpiece, this fleet. She had overseen the final integration of the gravity drives herself. There was no mechanical challenge she believed they couldn't meet. On the bridge of the Morning Star, Communications Officer Yuna felt a different chill. Her station was alive with the routine chatter of the fleet, but in a quiet corner of her screen, she had pulled up the raw data from the chrysalis. The signal's translation stared back at her. Boundary is death. The words were so simple, so final. Unlike the others, she had not just read the summary. She had listened to the signal's audio layer. It was not a voice. It was a sound like cold metal and shattering glass, a tone that felt like a pressure on the mind. It didn't sound like a lie. Something wrong, Yuna? Admiral Jin's voice was not unkind. She quickly cleared the screen. No, sir. All comms channels are clear. Good. A time for focus, not for ghosts. The warp sequence initiated. A deep, subaudible hum vibrated through every deck plate. From the outside, space around the bows of the 12 ships seemed to fracture, revealing a blue-white tunnel of chaotic energy. One by one, the great vessels shot forward and vanished, leaving only distorted starlight in their wake. The journey through the warp gate network was smooth, a testament to Sue's engineering. They transited through 3 relay points, corridors of folded space maintained by human technology. Each jump brought them closer to the Orion Arm, to the silent, uncharted vastness where the warning waited. During the long transit periods, life on the fleet was routine. Crews ate, slept, trained. Admiral Jin held briefings, projecting the stellar map of Sector X987. Our primary mission is observation, he stated. We will exit warp at a safe distance, deploy long-range sensors, and attempt our own communication. We are here to understand, not to provoke. But the weapons batteries remained powered, the fighter wings on standby alert. The unspoken message was clear. Understanding would be done from a position of overwhelming strength. Yuna spent her off hours trying to analyze the warning signal further, but its encryption defied her tools. It was a wall. All she could conclude was its age and its impossible, steady power source. It was a wall that had been standing for millennia, and they were sailing straight for it. Finally, the last jump approached. The fleet gathered at the final warp gate, a human-built ring floating in the profound loneliness between stars. This was the edge of the map. Beyond this gate lay the coordinates. All ships' final system checks, Jin commanded. Across the fleet, engineers like Sue gave their confirmations. Pilots like Min sealed their cockpits, ready to scramble. Warp sequence engaging in 10. The first officer counted down. Yuna's hands were cold on her console. She looked at the swirling blue vortex of the gate ahead. It looked like a mouth. 3, 2, 1. Engage. The lurch of warp transition was familiar. The stars blurred into streaks. This chunk felt longer, darker. The normal cosmic background noise seemed muted, absorbed by a deeper silence. When the ships tore back into normal space, the view was anticlimactic. They hung in the void. The coordinates X987 designated a point of empty space. No alien megastructure, no fleet of silent ships, not even an unusual nebula. Just the distant, cold glitter of ancient suns and the empty black between them. A collective, quiet sigh seemed to go through the fleet's combs. There was a ripple of relieved laughter, quickly silenced. "Sensor sweep," Jin ordered. "Full spectrum. Look for anything energy signatures, debris, mass shadows." Minutes passed. Reports came back clean. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Pilot Min's voice crackled over the fighter wing channel. "Raven to command. It's quieter than a museum out here. No paint on this fence." Admiral Jin allowed himself a small breath. Perhaps it was a hoax. Perhaps the chrysalis analyst had overreacted. He felt the weight of command lighten slightly. "Begin deploying the long-range probe array," he instructed. "Let's get a deeper scan of the surrounding sectors." Communications Officer Yuna broadcast the standard first contact package on all frequencies. "Peaceful greetings from Earth." Yuna obeyed, her fingers transmitting the composed messages of friendship and curiosity composed by diplomats back home. She listened for any reply. Only static answered. For 6 hours, the fleet hung motionless, a grand and powerful monument to human curiosity. Scans revealed no resources, no anomalies. It was simply empty space. Admiral Jin prepared his first report to Earth. He needed to phrase it correctly. A successful mission so far, no hostiles encountered, a mysterious warning now appearing to be a false alarm or a puzzle for XENO-archaeologists. He opened the channel to the tight beam comms for command. He spoke clearly, his voice echoing slightly in the quiet bridge. "This is Admiral Jin of the Ninth Fleet, reporting from coordinates X987. Initial reconnaissance complete. No contacts, no immediate threats detected. Sector appears devoid of artificial structures or energy signatures. We are deploying secondary probes and continuing scans. Will update in 6 hours. Ninth Fleet standing by." He closed the channel. The message, traveling at the speed of light, would take weeks to reach home. His duty was done for now. "Maintain position," he told the bridge crew. "Stay sharp." On the Steadfast, Sue noted a faint, anomalous energy reading on the very edge of her long-range scanners. It was a flicker, a ripple in space-time, so slight she almost dismissed it as a sensor ghost. She marked it for review later. In her cockpit. Min watched the same stars, bored. And at her station. Yuna stared at the unchanging static on her screen. The warning from Hana's report ringing louder in her mind than any silence. They were inside the boundary now, and nothing had happened yet. The clock started ticking down. The light from 3 distant stars painted the monitoring station chrysalis in cold, silent hues. It hung in the emptiness between solar systems, a lonely outpost of humanity listening to the deep. Inside, the only sounds were the soft hum of life support and the rhythmic tapping on a console. Analyst Hannah rubbed her tired eyes. Her shift had been long, filled with the usual cosmic static and meaningless pulsar echoes. She was about to call it a day when a new signal trace, sharper than anything natural, scrolled across her main screen. Her fingers froze. It was coming from the Orion arm, from a sector marked only as X987 on the star charts. No human ship was scheduled to be there. No known colony existed. She isolated the signal. It was layered, complex. The first layer was simple mathematics, a universal hello. The second was a star map, highlighting the forbidden sector. The third, Hannah's breath caught. It was not a greeting. It was a pattern that her translation software flagged with a red pulsing border. She ran the decryption protocol 3 times, each result the same. The words appeared on her screen, clean and terrible. Asterisk, do not approach coordinates X987. Boundary is death. Turn back. Asterisk, it was not a threat. It was a warning. A final one. The syntax was absolute, leaving no room for negotiation or curiosity. The signal repeated on a loop. A lighthouse, not for guidance, but for deterrence. For the next 6 hours, Hannah worked without pause. She verified the signal's origin, triangulated it to a point less than a light year from the given coordinates. She analyzed its energy signature. It was ancient, powered by something her instruments couldn't quantify, and yet it was perfectly maintained. This was no hoax. This was the work of an intelligence that made humanity's few centuries of space travel look like a child's first steps. With her heart thudding against her ribs, she compiled her report. She attached every data packet, every analysis, and at the top, in clear language, she wrote, urgent and verified, extrasolar boundary warning, advise immediate caution and non-approach. She sent it directly to Earth's Unified Defense Command on the priority channel. The one reserved for declarations of war got the reaction. When it came hours later, was not what she expected. A video conference connected her to a panel of faces in a warm, wood-paneled room on Earth. They looked bored. Analyst Hannah, began a senior military officer, his uniform heavy with medals. We've reviewed your data. Interesting, certainly. But a warning? It's more likely a trick. The Ares conglomerate from Mars has been testing new long-range drones. Or the Titan separatists trying to scare us off a potential mining zone. A scientist on the panel nodded. The message is simplistic. A truly advanced civilization would attempt contact, not just post a sign. Hannah felt a cold knot form in her stomach. With respect, sirs, the sophistication is in the signal's delivery and endurance, not its poetry. It's a perimeter marker. It says, do not enter. We should listen. An older man with a calm, weathered face spoke next. He was Ambassador Kim, a diplomat who had seen first contact turn into trade wars and cold conflicts. The young analyst is correct to urge caution, he said, his voice quiet but firm. We do not know what placed that signal. To ignore a direct warning is not bravery. It is arrogance. We should dispatch a single, unmanned probe. A listening post. Not a fleet. The military officer scoffed. A probe? Ambassador, the 9th Fleet is fully commissioned and awaiting its shakedown mission. This is perfect. It's a show of strength. If it's a hoax, we expose it and claim the sector. If there's something there, we meet it from a position of power. We cannot let fear dictate our expansion. The debate raged in the comfortable room light years away. Hannah could only watch, her warning a small, ignored box on their larger screens. They spoke of resource rights, of political pressure from the colonies for new territories, of the need to justify the 9th Fleet's enormous budget. The signal from X987 was not a message to be understood. It had become a problem to be solved, an obstacle to be overcome. Ambassador Kim fought hard. You are interpreting a keep out sign as an invitation to kick down the door. We have no idea what's on the other side. But his was the lone voice of caution. The political momentum was too great. The 9th Fleet was Earth's newest and greatest symbol of Power 12 mighty battleships. The Pulse class, each capable of leveling a city from orbit. Sending them to investigate a mysterious signal was a statement. Humanity would not be told. Where it could and could not go. The decision was finalized. The 9th Fleet, under the command of the celebrated Admiral Jin, would proceed to coordinates X987, They would assess the situation, demonstrate peaceful but firm intent, and secure the area. The official order was stamped and sent. When the conference link cut, Hannah was left in the silence of the chrysalis. The warning signal still pulsed on her secondary monitor, a steady, rhythmic beat in the dark. Boundary is death. Turn back. She put her head in her hands. They had not just dismissed the warning. They had weaponized their ignorance. She thought of the families of the crews who would board those ships, trusting their leaders. She thought of Admiral Jin, a good man, walking into a dark room because his superiors told him the light switch was just inside. On Earth, the news networks were already celebrating. They showed majestic shots of the Ninth Fleet in orbit, gleaming under the sun. They interviewed Admiral Jin, who spoke of duty and discovery. They never mentioned the signal's specific message. The public narrative was one of bold exploration. In his office, Ambassador Kim looked out at the blue planet, his reflection superimposed on the oceans. He had lost. He knew in his bones that some lines once crossed could not be uncrossed. He had seen the data. That signal didn't come from anything that understood negotiation. And on the edge of known space, Hannah watched as the Ninth Fleet's transponders activated, a cluster of bright dots on her tactical screen. They formed up and with a silent flash of blue energy, vanished into warp towards the Orion arm got, towards coordinates X987, towards the boundary. The final warning glowed on, unheard,